Cold rain hammered the streets of downtown Chicago, while luxury cars lined the entrance of the city's most exclusive charity gala. Security guards smiled at wealthy guests wearing designer suits until a quiet, black paramedic named Marcus Johnson stepped from an old sedan carrying a simple invitation nobody expected him to possess. Marcus adjusted his borrowed tuxedo and walked toward the entrance with calm confidence. He had spent 12 exhausting hours saving lives after a highway collision before rushing home to prepare. Tonight was supposed to celebrate ordinary heroes, yet nobody seemed interested in recognizing one. A smiling hostess accepted invitations from every guest without hesitation. When Marcus offered his invitation, her expression instantly changed. She examined the expensive card repeatedly, then glanced toward another employee, as though she believed someone had made an embarrassing mistake somewhere along the process. The woman forced a polite smile before quietly saying, "This invitation cannot possibly belong to you, sir." Marcus politely replied that his name was printed directly beneath the golden seal. Instead of apologizing, she called the head of security without another single word. Nearby guests slowed their conversations and turned their attention toward the growing scene. Expensive cameras flashed around celebrities entering the ballroom, while whispers spread through the crowd. Several people assumed Marcus had stolen the invitation because nobody imagined someone like him belonged among powerful donors. The head of security arrived, wearing an expensive black suit and a confident smile. After glancing at Marcus for barely 3 seconds, he folded his arms and demanded government identification. Every wealthy guest around Marcus entered freely without showing anything except their invitations. Marcus calmly handed over his driver's license. The guard studied it carefully before comparing every letter against the invitation. Everything matched perfectly. Instead of admitting his mistake, he claimed another verification would still be necessary because this event followed extremely strict security procedures. A young woman standing nearby watched everything unfold with growing discomfort. She had entered moments earlier without any questions, despite forgetting her identification completely. Watching Marcus's face, repeated suspicion simply because of his appearance made her realize something painfully familiar was happening before everyone's eyes. Marcus remained surprisingly calm, although humiliation burned inside him. Working as a paramedic had taught him patience under impossible pressure. He remembered frightened children trapped inside crushed vehicles and grieving parents begging strangers for miracles. Compared with those moments, insults should have felt insignificant, yet tonight they hurt deeply. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors while an orchestra performed elegant music. Wealthy business owners laughed beside politicians and famous athletes. Completely unaware that the event's invited guest of honor remained stranded outside because someone refused to believe his invitation was genuine, the security supervisor finally spoke into his radio, requesting confirmation from event management. Instead of verifying privately, he announced Marcus Johnson's full name loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. More curious faces turned toward Marcus, while uncomfortable silence slowly replaced cheerful conversation around the entrance. One elderly couple quietly shook their heads, believing security was simply protecting the event. Others secretly recorded everything using their phones. Within minutes, short video clips began appearing across social media, showing only fragments of the confrontation, leaving viewers to invent their own conclusions. Marcus noticed cameras pointing toward him from every direction. Years earlier, he might have walked away to escape public embarrassment. Tonight felt different. Leaving would silently confirm everyone's assumptions. Remaining calm offered the only chance to protect not only his dignity but everyone watching. Several minutes later, the event coordinator hurried outside looking visibly nervous. She recognized Marcus immediately because she had personally mailed his invitation weeks earlier. Before she could speak, the security supervisor interrupted, insisting proper procedures justified every action taken against the suspicious guests standing before them. The coordinator stared directly at him, then quietly asked one question. "Did you verify every other invitation this way tonight?" The supervisor hesitated for several uncomfortable seconds before admitting he had not. The surrounding crowd suddenly became noticeably quieter after hearing that unexpected confession. Embarrassment crossed the coordinator's face as she apologized sincerely to Marcus in front of everyone. She explained that Marcus had been specially invited because he rescued 12 people during a devastating train accident. Earlier that year, despite suffering injuries himself while pulling strangers from burning wreckage, whispers immediately changed direction. Guests who moments earlier doubted Marcus now looked away awkwardly. Some lowered their phones while others stopped recording altogether. Nobody expected the quiet man facing public suspicion to be the very hero tonight's celebration. Intended to honor above every wealthy donor inside, Marcus accepted the apology politely, yet something inside him remained unsettled. Recognition meant little if respect disappeared the moment people judged appearances first. Awards decorated walls forever, but dignity depended upon choices. Ordinary people made during ordinary moments, exactly like the one everyone had just witnessed. Before entering the ballroom, Marcus turned toward the gathering crowd. He smiled gently without anger, before thanking everyone who waited patiently instead of rushing toward assumptions. His words carried surprising calm, making several people feel far more uncomfortable than shouting ever could have accomplished. Inside the ballroom, hundreds of elegant guests applauded as Marcus finally entered. Most believed they welcomed a celebrated hero. Very few realized he had already survived the hardest part of the evening outside those glittering doors, where prejudice quietly wore the disguise of professional procedure. As Marcus walked toward the stage, he noticed the same security supervisor standing near the ballroom entrance, avoiding eye contact completely. Marcus could have demanded punishment or public embarrassment. Instead, he simply nodded respectfully, proving true strength often appears strongest when revenge becomes the easiest possible choice. The master of ceremonies welcomed everyone before announcing an inspiring surprise. Tonight's keynote speaker would not be a billionaire celebrity or famous politician. Instead, the audience would hear from a paramedic whose courage reminded the city that humanity carried greater value than money, influence, or appearance. Marcus stepped behind the microphone while every conversation disappeared. Thousands watched inside the ballroom, and millions would later watch online. Nobody knew that the first sentence leaving his lips would transform an uncomfortable incident into a conversation the entire country could never again ignore. Marcus looked across the silent ballroom before taking one slow breath. Every face waited for a speech about courage after disasters. Instead, he quietly said, "The hardest rescue of my life did not happen inside a burning train. It happened 20 minutes ago outside these very doors." The room instantly became silent. Forks stopped moving, and every camera pointed toward the stage. Guests exchanged confused looks because nobody expected the honored speaker to mention something uncomfortable during a celebration carefully designed to highlight generosity instead of painful truths. Marcus described every detail without raising his voice. He explained how his invitation had been questioned repeatedly while others entered freely. He carefully avoided mentioning names because his purpose was not destroying one person's career, but exposing a mindset quietly affecting countless innocent people every day. Several guests lowered their eyes with visible embarrassment. Others remembered walking past Marcus outside without asking whether he needed support. They realized silence sometimes protects discrimination more effectively than cruel words. That uncomfortable realization spread across the ballroom faster than any speech could normally travel. Marcus smiled gently before continuing. He said, "Racism rarely announces itself with shouting anymore. Sometimes it hides behind policies, procedures, extra verifications, suspicious looks, and assumptions, appearing perfectly reasonable until someone notices only one person receives that treatment while everyone else walks comfortably through." The audience remained completely silent. Even the orchestra stopped playing because nobody wanted to interrupt. Every sentence felt deeply personal. Some guests remembered moments where they unknowingly judged strangers within seconds. Others recalled times they remained silent because speaking seemed inconvenient or uncomfortable. Marcus then surprised everyone by praising the coordinator, who apologized publicly. He explained that true leadership never means avoiding mistakes. Real leadership begins the moment someone honestly admits wrongdoing and chooses correction over excuses. The ballroom responded with respectful applause, growing louder every passing second. The applause suddenly stopped after Marcus invited the security supervisor onto the stage. Shock spread across the audience. Television crews moved closer, expecting public humiliation. The supervisor walked slowly toward Marcus, looking nervous, while thousands of eyes followed every uncertain step across the polished wooden floor. Marcus reached forward and shook the man's hand firmly. Then he faced the audience and explained, "Hatred cannot disappear if every mistake ends with permanent destruction. Accountability matters, but growth matters too. The greatest victory comes when people choose understanding instead of repeating endless cycles of resentment." The supervisor accepted the microphone with trembling hands. Fighting back tears, he admitted his actions reflected unconscious assumptions developed over many years. He apologized directly to Marcus before apologizing to everyone watching who experienced similar treatment throughout their own lives, despite doing absolutely nothing wrong. Nobody expected those words. Several guests quietly wiped tears from their faces. Others stood and applauded spontaneously. Television reporters quickly realized this evening had transformed from another charity gala into a powerful national conversation about fairness, dignity, and the hidden forms discrimination still takes today. Unknown to everyone inside, one guest uploaded the earlier entrance video alongside Marcus's speech. Within minutes, millions watched both clips together. The internet immediately understood the full story instead of misleading fragments. Public opinion changed dramatically as viewers recognized exactly what had happened outside. By midnight, the video became the most discussed topic across social media. Thousands shared personal experiences remarkably similar to Marcus's. Teachers, doctors, firefighters, engineers, veterans, and students described moments where simple assumptions questioned their honesty, competence, or belonging before anyone knew their names. Morning newspapers across America featured Marcus on their front pages. Headlines praised his calm response instead of angry confrontation. Commentators explained that dignity under pressure forced people to examine uncomfortable truths more effectively than endless arguments ever could. His message reached audiences from every political background. Marcus returned to work the very next morning wearing his ordinary paramedic uniform. His co-workers congratulated him warmly, but he simply smiled and prepared the ambulance for another shift. Fame never interested him because emergencies never paused while cameras searched for inspirational stories. Across television screens, only 2 hours into the shift, Marcus responded to a serious accident involving a luxury sports car. Smoke filled the highway while frightened witnesses gathered nearby. Without hesitation, Marcus rushed toward the damaged vehicle exactly as he had countless times before throughout his demanding professional career. When firefighters finally opened the crushed driver's door, Marcus froze briefly. The injured man staring back at him was the same security supervisor from the Gala. Blood covered his forehead while fear completely replaced the confidence. Marcus remembered from the previous evening's painful encounter outside. The supervisor recognized Marcus immediately. His voice cracked as he whispered that he understood if Marcus wanted another medic instead. Marcus answered without hesitation, "My responsibility begins where judgment ends." Then he focused entirely on saving the frightened man's life despite everything that happened before. For 40 exhausting minutes, Marcus worked beside doctors and firefighters until the injured man finally stabilized. As the ambulance reached the hospital, the supervisor grabbed Marcus's hand weakly before whispering, "Thank you." Marcus simply nodded because compassion required no audience and expected no applause. Several hospital employees later discovered who both men were after recognizing news reports from the previous night. Word spread rapidly through the emergency department. Doctors, nurses, patients, and visitors quietly watched. Marcus continued performing his duties exactly the same way he treated every stranger needing immediate medical help. That single rescue became another national headline. People admired Marcus not because he forgave easily, but because he refused allowing someone else's prejudice to define his own character. His actions demonstrated that integrity survives even when respect from others temporarily disappears during life's most painful moments. Schools invited Marcus to speak with students. Police departments requested workshops discussing unconscious bias. Large corporations redesigned employee training after hearing his story. What began as one humiliating encounter outside a charity gala slowly inspired practical changes, reaching workplaces, classrooms, hospitals, and communities across the nation. Marcus always ended every speech with identical words: "Never judge someone's value before learning their story. The strongest person inside any room may quietly carry invisible victories, impossible to recognize through clothing, appearance, wealth, or first impressions. Respect should arrive before assumptions ever have the chance." Months later, Marcus walked past the same ballroom where everything began. This time, security guards welcomed every guest using identical procedures, regardless of appearance. Watching strangers enter equally brought Marcus greater satisfaction than receiving another award because lasting change always mattered more than personal recognition. As Marcus disappeared into the busy Chicago streets, countless people continued sharing his story across the world. It reminded millions that courage is not measured only during disasters. Sometimes, true courage simply means standing with dignity when someone wrongly decides you never belonged there in the first place.